while most of the Western world, especially, is paying attention to the Russia-Ukraine war with the events unfolding in the Kursk region, the Ukraine side decided to expand it again and maybe refocused the global attention on the war by striking directly at Moscow. And overnight, somewhere around a dozen drones were fired from Ukraine into Russia. But according to most reports, none of them actually struck their targets. However, according to Michael Clark, there was another objective of those strikes when he says it's to send a message. Watch this.
If they say they've brought them down, they probably have. Of course, they've got to fall somewhere, and the chances are they will have done some damage, although there are no deaths reported. But from the Ukrainian point of view, they have the effect in Moscow of closing the airport. And that, again, for a while, and that brings home to the Russian people that this is war. You know, you can't insulate yourself from this. And that's the message that the Ukrainians are trying to send out. They know most of these drones won't get through, but if one or two get through, they score the point. And they inconvenience ordinary Russians in Moscow who pretend this isn't really happening.
Inconvenience the people in Moscow. Now that's an interesting objective for that operation. I'm not sure that that's going to work out the way the Ukraine side thinks, or certainly that Michael Clark seems to think. But we're going to break down what was going on in Moscow, what's going on in the Ukraine offensive in the Kursk area, and also with the Russian offensive in the east, especially around Pokrovsk and Toretsk. And we have a new guest on today, somebody that a lot of you already know, and that is Wyatt from Defense Politics Asia. Somebody I've been watching for quite a long time, and I'm just delighted to have you on the show today. So first of all, Wyatt, just welcome to our show.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you for inviting me to the show. A lot of people talk very good things about your show, and then they have been saying, "Oh, Wyatt, you should be on his show," something like this. So I'm very glad to be here.
And now here you are. So I think it's gonna be good for both of us, and certainly for our viewers as well. And I just wonder, because since you haven't been on our show, some of our guys may not know who you are. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about it, because as I understand, you among the many of the mappers that are out there have been doing this from the very beginning of the war. And I just wonder if you could tell us kind of how you got that, and also from your military background, because you also served. And I wonder if you could explain kind of how you started your process.
Okay, so I'm Wyatt from Defense Politics Asia, and so I have been doing the Ukraine war mapping since day one. What I call this the mapping reporting. So basically, report based on the map. So this I think I might be the first. DPA might be the first YouTube channel that actually covers from day one, and then all the other big boys come later, and then inspired a lot of different channels to do the same. And so now I have a lot of competition. So it's what it is. And so I used to be a professional soldier. I served in the Singapore Armed Forces for 6 years under the Intel umbrella. So anything else I cannot tell you. If not, I have to kill a lot of people. So so this is some background, and so how I do the mapping is inspired by my experience during the military, where I have to sit through SIP reps, situation reports, and usually they are very boring. We go through information, every little bit of intel, and then someone will piece them up together. I'm not the one who did it. No, I'm not the analyst in the show. And so in the game, in those days when I was still in the military, I have already left the military for more than 10 years. So it's been a long time. So, and yeah.
So I wonder if you can, although first of all, I'll point out that what may seem to be boring to one person is quite interesting to another. So when I see some of these so-called boring reports, they mean a lot, especially when you're looking in the context of the human beings that are actually fighting and dying on the battlefield. So I think it's an incredibly valuable report. And as I was saying to you before we came on the air here, the quality of the product that you produce here used to be considered like top secret in some of my combat deployments. I mean, only if you had all these high-tech capabilities and the ability to fuse different sources of information onto an operational map was going on. It used to be something limited to only the professional military guys. And now that here you're doing it on an open source, is just extraordinary how it's going on. And I wonder if you could maybe pull up your map that you use a lot there and just kind of explain, because I know that you're somewhat unique amongst some anyway, that you have kind of a collusion of the Russian side and the Russian claims and the Ukrainian side, and then you kind of fuse all that together to have one probably the best guess of what actually the ground truth is. I wonder if you can talk a little bit about how you do what you do.
So I would like to share first this that this is the DPA's mapping. You for those that have never seen this before, you can actually go to defensepoliticsasia.com/Ukraine. You can actually access this map. So it's publicly available. So just to explain a little bit about the methodology is that this is actually not one map. There's actually two different maps, two maps. There's a blue map, which is the Ukrainian map, and then there's the pink map, which is the Russian map. So basically, this is actually a combination of two different mappings. And because the Ukrainians, if you look at the Ukrainian reports, they have a different reality from the Russians. They have two different narrative or two different mappings, or even appreciation of what's actually happening on the ground. And if you just take one mapping, it's going to be always wrong somehow. Because someone must be wrong, someone must be right. And when you put both maps together, when you overlay, you start to see somewhat a sense of what the reality might actually be. Because like the overlapping mappings, you can see that these are probably gray zones. Like there's these conflicting claims, which I usually say, I call them conflicting claims. So the overlapping mapping will allow you to know that this is clearly a gray zone. And but then when you see both mappings start to converge together, you know that that's the reality. And every single point here is actually sourced. Every single point has a source. I don't make anything up. Every single point has a source. So the entire mapping is 100% sourced. There is no.
Wow, that's amazing. And let me ask, because I know a lot of the term that you hear oftentimes is this has been geolocated, etc. Can you explain what that means? What does it mean, and how do you geolocate a video?
So the geolocations usually is done by someone else. I for this, like Chris759, one of my internet friend, Twitter friends. He's one of the best geolocators out there. But nowadays, we have Creamy Caprice, Military Summary also have a very good geolocator under his wing, and you can see all these things. So different geolocation may actually be different things, but for my mapping purposes, I only care, is it a Russian or the Ukrainian that was geolocated? And because that indicates the furthest extent of where the Russian or the Ukrainian forces have went to. And it could also, some people might say, for example, in lately, just happens like past 24, 48 hours, the Ukrainians actually have an incursion all the way through this cursed city or town of Kirinevo. However, the airstrike basically destroyed most of them. But for my case, because I'm only doing mapping, all I care is that the Ukrainians went here as far as this position, and this is how I mapped it. So the Ukrainian forces have already arrived at this location. Because whatever the videos that we are seeing is because someone want us to see it. Every piece of information we see.
So how does whether you or somebody that works with you or somebody else, when a video shows up and it says this is in this particular town, how do you know whether they're telling the truth or whether it's actually a different town or even a different time? How do you validate the authenticity of a video?
So sometimes I do my own geolocations, because you can geolocate by looking at landmarks and the way how the road shapes, what kind of is there those electrical wires kind of things, the way how the forest shapes like. It is possible to geolocate. And the geolocation that I nowadays plot, because I personally is not that good at geolocation. I still do, but there are some geolocations that some other people do is crazy. They are super good at it. But nowadays I just plot, and unless I feel that it's a little bit weird, then I would do fact checking of it. But generally, Military Summary, Creamy Caprice, Chris759, these three are the usual guys I usually plot from. Very reliable. Very reliable. So I usually don't have to fact check them, because I trust their work. So generally that's that. But I do, but a lot of the time, half of the time I don't watch the videos that they geolocate. I only watch sometimes where I feel that it's a bit, I think it might be very important to know. Like for example, this is when I watch it, there was like, the entire column indeed was destroyed. Like, so then I can have some context. I can tell the people that there was this attack that they tried to attack to the rear position. Let me draw some arrows. I think my viewers will be very familiar with this. So Ukrainians could be like, they are trying to do this. They're trying to storm to the rear positions so that they can block the Russian reinforcement. So the Russians cannot reinforce, and then they will have a better chance of taking this town. They have been struggling with this town since the beginning of the Kursk offensive. So yeah, so somehow I piece up some of the misinformation, but of course I always tell them that no, this is just my opinion. No, this is not reality.
So let's look into some of this now. Let's go into some of the actual operations here. Let's kind of I guess zoom back out on the whole Kursk operation here, which I guess is where you're at right now. So how have you seen this from the beginning when it was some very large and fast movements to say over the last 3 or 4 days that maybe it slowed down? Has Russia contained it, or is the Ukraine side continuing to move forward?
Largely, the Russian side has contained it, but there are some problems. So my personal initial analysis was that this operation will end in the Ukrainians will be pushed out entirely in 2 weeks. But I was wrong, because the Ukrainians actually invested way more into this. They doubled down on the operation, and they continued to do maneuver warfare and try to break through the countrysides as far as they can. And they're currently stuck in a few lines. So there's this northern line, I call it the Kauchuk line, or the northern front. They're stuck here. They cannot get through the Kerenevo region. They're stuck there. And then there is this area here where the Ukrainians lately have been, this past day has been very excited about. They say that they encircled the Russian forces at Malaya Lognia. But they have been encircled for a long time already, for at least a week, actually. But the Ukrainians didn't know that because they don't do the mapping that I do, or they don't watch my reports. and then the Russians also have a pretty firm line around this area, this Poroshnoye, this twin Poroshnoye town, Cheskaya Poroshnoye and Noraskoye Poroshnoye. And the Russians also have this firm line. Previously was at this place called Martinovka, but the Ukrainians claim they have captured it. And there's another line around here. So this is the main part where the Ukrainians have more active. There's another part where the Ukrainians previously have this breakout, but this one didn't work out after the entire force got destroyed over at Giri. So the Ukrainians actually came here, and then they were destroyed. And then the Russians now has this strong line around here. So generally speaking, the Ukrainians are stuck, except that they are now breaking through this area here. This area is where the latest report about there's this river where 3 of the major bridges was destroyed by the Ukrainians. So this is actually the what I call the southern part of the western flank. So let me.
So if I could ask you on the western flank, let's look at that for a second, because I think those bridges may be more illustrative than some may realize. Because blowing a bridge for militarily is a double-edged sword. It can prevent your enemy from reinforcing into an area, but it can also limit you from going forward into that area. So I wonder if you could talk about what those bridges, where they may be, and what that tells you about the intentions of the Ukraine side.
So the Ukrainians actually blew up these 3 bridges. The main one is this one over at this city of Klushkovo, or the town. Then there's 2 other bridges around this location. So as a result, the entire river here is now uncrossable unless you have a pontoon crossing. So the Ukrainians have actually taken this area here, which is also along the river, the other side of the river. They captured it because the Russians can't defend it at all. The Russians are still defending the border checkpoint at Takuno. So now the Ukrainians are trying to push from the west, from this eastern part on the western flank. They're trying to push in. But like you mentioned, there is a major problem, is that when the Ukrainians blow up all the bridge, this also means that they are not intending to go further. They can't go further. This is just not possible, because they were going to face the same geographical issues, which means that the Ukrainians may just want to capture this and hold this for ransom. In the future peace negotiation, maybe this is what they're aiming to do that. And another issue might be also because there is a massive collapse over at the New York front and the Pokrov sector of the Adivka front. And this major collapse, if they go onto the news, is going to be very bad. And this Kursk offensive have largely covered up those failures on that side of the war. And I think the Ukrainians are now desperate to get this entire region, which is not a small region, it's actually pretty big. Like, we are talking about just the river 40, 50 kilometers in length. So this is a very big area. So if they can
And
capture
do you have
this,
any sense of how many Russian troops are in that area right now, the one you're highlighting?
oh, I have no idea, man.
Okay.
I have no
Okay,
idea.
got that. So, and actually, that you bring up a good point. I want to address here. First of all, Gary, let's pull up that quote from Zelensky where he's specifically talking about both the Kursk, the Pokrovsk, and the Toretsk area. Play that clip.
There was a report from Commander-in-Chief Syrsky, the front line, defense in the Pokrovsk and Toretsk directions. The situation is difficult, but our guys are doing everything to eliminate the occupier. The Commander-in-Chief also reported on the updates in the Kursk direction. We are achieving our set goals.
So he didn't explain what those set goals are, and actually, I've assembled a list here of what a number of Ukraine forces have at various times said was the goals. We'll get into that in a minute. But from what you're looking at your map here, before we go to the Pokrovsk and the Toretsk area, which I think is very important, do you believe that Ukraine is achieving goals in this area based on what your map shows?
Not entirely. Generally speaking, their goals are also very unclear, I would say. The initial, it looks like they are going for Lvov, this city over here. Then they might also be looking at the Kursk nuclear power plant.
Yeah.
And this was actually one of the most hyped up right at the beginning. People were asking me, messaging me as well about asking me about this. But my answer to them immediately was like, they're not going to reach there. It's too far. And so far, 2 weeks plus in, I think I'm correct that it's too far for them. They cannot break through because you have to accept that for them to reach here, you must believe that the Russians have no military capabilities. So it's a bit of a stretch, you know. So and then for the fact that they are trapped here, and yet the Ukrainians are trying to push, it looks like Lvov definitely is one of the targets. Like they're still.
You said that in the past week or so, the Ukraine has not been able to push north of the current line right there. Is that correct?
Yeah, they're stuck here. So, like for example, the earliest point it was on the 11th. This was 15, 12. So they have been stuck here since the 11th, earliest or 10th. Yeah, so it's a bit like almost 2 weeks, coming to 2 weeks now. So they're stuck here for too long. So if we talk about maneuver warfare, you know, you don't maneuver if you're stuck in the same place, you know, you're not moving. And it seems like they're very adamant to go through this area. Like they must go through this area somehow. Like instead of the earlier part of the offensive, they tried to go through all the countryside. It seems like they are more determined to push through this hard sector. And I find it a bit unusual. Like I would expect them to actually go sideways.
Yeah.
But they seem to be pretty adamant at taking out, this region here. Like they really want this somehow. And then they were doing this flanking movement, flank north, and then they got destroyed in an ambush in Safanovka.
Yeah.
So they must be aiming for Lvov. Like this is they're wasting too much forces, pushing this point.
Yeah, and I think that's really highlighting one of the big risks that I have been concerned about for the Ukraine side from the beginning here is that they seem to have set tactical objectives that I'm not sure they have the forces to actually attain. And it reminds me of the Ardennes offensive by the Germans late in December 1944. When they set Antwerp as their objective, and they made some initial big progress, but then after the Allies were alerted, everything they started bringing more and more troops. The advances slowed down, and then eventually they ran out of gas physically and steam as well. And it looks like something similar is starting to play out here, though it hasn't completely lost all of its forward momentum yet. I think I've seen up to 35 kilometers, maybe the furthest penetration, but right now it doesn't seem to be going much further than that. And so there's a risk in this area that the whole force may eventually be stopped and then methodically destroyed by the Russian side. But as you pointed out a second ago, you talked about that there's another consequence to this, and that's in the east, in the Pokrovsk and Toretsk area. And I wonder if you can show me kind of what's going on in those areas that causes you some concern.
I just want to add one more point. In the Ardennes offensive, the Germans attacked in the fog. So the Allies have no air force. But in this offensive, since from the day one, every step of the way they get hit by airstrike, helicopter strike, and drone strikes. So as beautiful as the this incursion or mapping looks like for the Ukrainians, is paid with a lot of life and equipment. It's very expensive, and the longer they stay within enemy territory, the more they get attrition. So we do not know how much force they have committed. So we can only guess, because when they say a battalion or a brigade, it may not be a full brigade. So that's the main problem.
And before you switch over, do you have any knowledge from your mapping or even any of the other sources you see as to how many other forces Ukraine may have not yet engaged that they could put into that battle? Do you know?
Oh, so I actually been able to kind of estimate based on the shelling of the Russians. So there is a reserve force here, another one is here, there's another group here. So there's a few reserve force that is supporting the operation around here, around the main front. There's this huge force that is around Tekino, which I believe is the aim is to attack in from the western part of this Glushkovo conundrum. Then there is also this group of forces where the command post was allegedly just destroyed by the Russians over at Khrushchev.
Yeah, I saw that.
And this was actually the initial force that was expected to attack towards Rylis, together with this force that's supposed to break through at Karanevo. So it's supposed to be a pincer, and they're supposed to capture a much bigger ground. But it seems like they cannot break through here. So this force is not committed. So now they're going for a smaller target. It seems like that's the case. Because if they take this will be sorry.
A lot of this still has not yet unfolded, and it's not clear just how far their objectives are intended, much less what they're getting accomplished here. Okay, so with that kind of as a ground or a baseline, what is this doing to the western, to the eastern part of the front around Toretsk and Pokrovsk?
So the main, I think the biggest problem, I think even for a lot of the Ukrainian side was talking about this, that they are struggling over at this sector. So I call this the New York sector, and then this the Adiyevka, New York front and the Adiyevka front. And of course, previously the front to look like this because of the past 2 weeks, so much have changed. The Russians have captured so much grounds. Instead of putting effective forces to defend the Ukrainian land, they are now going in an incursion. And the Ukrainian forces over at these two fronts has been getting pushed back every single day. In fact, they have been pushed back in terms of the entire Ukraine war. They have been pushed back on a daily basis for more than half a year now. That means I have been doing frontline changes report. I'm doing frontline changes report every single day, and the Ukrainians are losing grounds every single day for half a year now. So imagine you are some Ukrainian forces, there is Ukrainian troops, you are at the front line, you're asking for equipment, support, reinforcement, and you're not getting them, and then suddenly you see your command sent do an offensive in the Kursk direction. Yeah, I'm quite sure a lot of the Ukrainian troops are going to be quite pissed. This is the feeling I get, because they are struggling to hold. Like even like for this sector, this is part of the Adiyevka front in the Pokrovsk sector. The Russians took this much ground, and I'm purely talking about Ukrainian claims. So this much ground was lost, just reported within the 24 hours period. Oh, wow. Of course, I don't think this happens over 24 hours because they are delaying information. Yeah. Right. But if you add in the Russian claims, it's even bigger. It's this much ground. And if you have such a big collapse across the entire front line, and instead of reinforcing and resupplying and strengthening the defense here, you went on an offensive, then it's a bit of a weird thing, is in a computer games term, it's like you gave up. So you just select all your units and just attack the enemy base, while the enemy is actually destroying your base. So it's the kind of a last ditch effort kind of feeling. But clearly this is not, because Ukraine is still a very big place. I think they still have a lot of land to trade for time, but it is very disturbing. However, a lot of the Ukrainian supporters are not seeing this because no one is reporting about this. I think on the Ukrainian side.
And
because
so,
they don't like that.
could you talk about why the Pokrovsk area? Because I keep hearing that one, even over Toretsk and the New York agglomeration. Why this one seems to be the most critical for the Ukraine side not to lose? What happens if the Russian side takes Pokrovsk?
So okay, so Pokrov, as you can see, this is actually the hub of this region. There is these major highways that goes out of Pokrov, not to mention the railway lines that links to the entire Ukrainian front line. So this actually helps to resupply and reinforce all these regions. In fact, we previously have airstrikes or missile strikes on this region where the Ukrainians are offloading troops and equipment at Pokrov. So this is actually a well-known transport hub, and this actually operates very similar to what Bakhmut used to do. So Bakhmut used to be that hub as well, where they actually goes out to all the fronts, to Popasna, to the Luhansk region, going to Severodonetsk, all the way up. So Pokrov is the same thing. But once the Russians start to fight in this area, they don't have to conquer Pokrov. Just by fighting at Pokrov, the entire communication logistic will be broken down, which means that the entire this sector is going to be, in some kind of a very serious problem. Like all the resupply, have to go one big round. They have to go through Kramatorsk. They have to go through the south. This entire sector will be compromised. It will be gone. And if the Russians continue to break through, they could even just continue to go on to Polorad and then just ignore everything here. The entire front will just collapse because the priorities will change. I believe that the Ukrainians will have to prioritize Dnipro region, because once the Russian cross the Dnipro region, this the Dnipro Oblast, I think it will be some kind of PR disaster. And
one of the things, as a military planner, from the defensive side, especially when you're looking at situations, it would be incumbent if and I don't forget what that is. It's like 10 kilometers from Pokrovsk. Is that how far the current
is? Just around 10 kilometers.
Okay, perfect. Then you would see then you would say, all right, now let's start maybe building another line and another line, maybe 10 kilometers behind that, to continue to have a fallback line onto. Do you see any evidence with your mapping that the Ukraine side is building additional lines of defense behind that?
They already have some entrenchment that was already built previously. Are they building new ones? I haven't seen anyone talking about it. There is some anecdotal information, like planting trees in Pokrov for some reasons. Like there are some corruption still going on within Ukraine, but that's anecdotal. I'm not sure. So, and given that they are so committed over at the Kursk front, it's very hard to imagine them to invest more over here, although they should, because Pokrov is way too important, and you cannot allow the fighting to reach here. Once the fighting reach here, is already affecting logistics. The Russians must be. This is the line that they have to be stopped. But the Russians are already here. So I tell my viewers there's actually 3 bosses around this area. There's a Horodivka, then Menograd, and then Pokrov. 1, 2, and 3. Like 3 bosses. The Russians have to fight the first 2 bosses before they reach the final boss. There's an alternate boss over here. But if the Ukrainians cannot stop them in all these different places, once the fighting reached this number 3, the final boss, the strategic situation changes, and it will be changing so drastically that it may collapse certain fronts. So that is the main concern. And my worry for the Ukrainian side is that they are not concerned. Like the pro-Ukrainian crowd, no one is talking about it. No one is worried about it. Anyone that's mentioned about it got classified as a Russian troll. And that's very disturbing, because it's like, if you have a kid, your kid is failing his exams, you should want to know that they are failing their exams, and you want to improve on it, improve what they are no good at. But then now they are preferring to close their eyes, and that is very weird. Like,
now, my understanding is that the Russian side, they have it their forces broken up into if I'm not mistaken, a northern, a central, and a southern command. And so presumably this Pokrovsk fight here is in the central command. But the question is, if the Central Command gets the fight up to Pokrovsk, as you mentioned here. Might the other two commands, I guess, north and south of that, take advantage of an opportunity and try to push through further? Or how do you see that part working out?
Okay, so currently, other than this, so the Center Command is actually very busy right now. They are conquering New York, which the Russian Defense Ministry just declared that they have captured it. They are fighting for Torex. They are now pushing in this Pokrov direction towards Pokrov. So they are very busy right now. The other fronts, however, is a bit different. In the southern part, in this what I call the Donetsk front, the forces here are now fighting in this direction, fighting for Konstantinivka and towards Vodian. This is the two main push, and there's also the Battle of Krasnohorivka currently ongoing. But the intensity of the fighting here is not at the level of the Adivka front. It's not of the Pokrov sector, but it's still pretty heavy, and the Ukrainians are also constantly getting pushed back. They are unable to hold the line right here, and in fact, the firm line should be around here. So whatever the line has already been broken. So whatever behind here is they're basically they don't have the proper entrenchment, I believe, to hold back the Russians, at least in this area here, in the Vodian direction. Similarly, there is its own tactical and strategic problems around here, but it's not as vital as Pokrov.
Yeah.
Pokrov
so the question is, if the fighting in Pokrovsk moves up to the city, what impact would that have on that southern part you just talked about?
So if let's say Russians reach Pokrov, so the main thing is that the forces will be divided. So the Ukrainians in this area here, in order to, let's say, they have to redeploy. For example, suddenly the fighting here get very intense. The Ukrainians will have to go one big round. And this round is going to be a huge round around. And this is going to stretch the logistics where they are already very stretched, from my understanding. So that's one thing. In terms of resupplies, also, a lot of the areas it's not going to reach, it's not going to get their supplies easily because the highway is now through here. And any forces around here is going to be struggling. Any forces around here is going to be struggling because there's no more Pokrov. So, yeah, there's only this road, these two roads down here. Yeah, there's a lot of it's going to just cause a lot of problem for the logistic. I mean, I'm quite sure there's the small roads, the dirt roads they can use, but it's not major roads. So it would not cause Ukraine to lose the war per se, but it just make life super hard, which life is already very hard. So that is the main thing.
Right. And so I guess what is the prognosis if Russia reaches up there? You pointed out that this has literally been going on for the entire calendar year of methodical movement to the west. Is there any possibility or risk for the Ukraine side that any of these could actually create a breakthrough where there could be a big movement by the Russian side, or will it just stay this incremental progress even if it goes through the rest of the year?
My personal guess is that if they take Pokrov, the Russians could just not stop and don't want to close up all the salients. They just push into Dnipro, and once the fighting gets deeper and deeper, the Ukrainians will start to read their priorities, and this is how the other fronts will start to collapse. This is what I think. Like, for example, what happened. One good example of this is actually when the Russians went on the Kharkiv offensive. This offensive around here actually caused the speed up of the collapse of all the fronts in the eastern part, because the Ukrainians started to send in a lot of their best forces around here. They reinforced all these areas, and it's a problem because when this first happened, I tell people that this is not going to go into Kharkiv. The Russians have no strategic reasons to capture Kharkiv. They're just going to make themselves more difficult. I believe this is just going to be a small incursion. Then they will hold a defense line and create a diversion. Basically, it's like they force the Ukrainians to fight here. And in fact, the Ukrainians probably also know this is the case, but they also just not dare to not defend. Because I did explain to people that not defending, even if you know that this is a diversion, you don't defend it.
Yeah.
Because if you don't defend it, the Russian will just keep moving forward.
Yeah. Right.
Then you get the PR disaster that you want to avoid, which is the surrounding of the Kharkiv again. So the Ukrainians send their best forces, here, and then they try to fight a very hard war. So this area here have one of the fiercest fighting. And the Russians basically created kill boxes and just wipe out the Ukrainians around this area. Like in this Lipsy sector, the Russians did not really push beyond this line. They just stay here, and the Ukrainians keep coming to them and keep getting destroyed. Similar situation over at the Voschansk sector. In the Battle of Voschansk, the Russians purposely did not close up this gap.
Really?
Like they could have gone to the river. There's a river around here.
Yeah.
But they don't. So the Ukrainians keep crossing over, and then we have countless geolocation of airstrikes in this region, particularly over in the high-rise zone. And this becomes a kill box. And they just keep going in and get killed because the Ukrainians don't want to lose the land. But then if they don't defend, the bombardment will just come deeper as well. And it's a very difficult decision for the Ukrainians to decide where to fight. And
do you have a sense of how many Russian troops are in this salient?
I have no idea. No idea.
Because I've heard that the initial incursion was fairly limited, like 4,000 to 6,000 at all. But how many have been reinforced? I haven't even heard any numbers, and I wonder if you had any sense of that part. Okay, very good there.
Yeah, generally, these are operational secrets. So, even if there are numbers that come out from the sources, they're most likely wrong. I believe the initial part was very, very strong. And then I believe that they have already redrawn a lot of the troops by now. But this Kharkiv offensive literally weakens the Avdiivka front and the New York front. And it was because of the Kharkiv front trapping all the Ukrainian forces, the New York front started to activate. Because the New York front was this sleepy front that almost nothing ever happens. The line was actually here. I think somewhere around here. And all these grounds was taken by the Russians. And this line
is the Kharkiv operation. That's how much.
Yes. So this line was pre-war. This was the Civil War line. So this line was very, very heavily entrenched. And no one believed that the Russians will ever invade through this area. Even myself, I'm telling people, no, it's impossible. This is a pointless, strategically meaningless place. No, the Russians will not attack it. And the Russians attack it. And the Ukrainians actually struggle to defend, which means that the Ukrainians may have redrawn a lot of the forces in this area to plug the hole in the Kharkiv front. And as a result, they don't have enough men, despite they have superior number of entrenchment and fortifications. They're unable to hold the line because there's just way too few men to hold the line. And that's not even mentioning that the Russians now have a advanced version of glide bombs that allow them to destroy heavy fortifications without risking their aircrafts, or the high precision artillery that they are using now. Lancet drones, which is can destroy any armor and RT without. There's so much innovation on the Russian side, and if you do not have enough men, then this front collapse as it should, unfortunately.
Yeah, so I guess it's impossible to say with any level of confidence how long something might take, but it just seems that the inevitable that the longer the time goes by, and because of all these advantages you just mentioned here, that the Russian side will continue to methodically push forward. And then there could be a break at some point where then there could be some big movements, which we haven't seen, frankly, since the opening of the war from the Russian side. It's just been methodical move forward. But what's impossible to know, and let me ask this more than state it, what I have not been able to ascertain is to what extent all this is having an impact on the Ukrainian armed forces in their defense, because I just know from my study of history and from my own personal combat experience, when you're on the defense, especially, it's a lot more difficult to keep fighting if you don't feel like there's a chance to eventually succeed. But then there's also concurrently the thing that even if I die, I'm just going to keep fighting no matter what, whether I think it's good or not. But the question is, at what point would they possibly break and collapse? Do you have any sense of that?
I'm not sure. Because I thought that they would have collapsed way earlier. But by this point, my belief is that they will fight to the end. It's a bit like World War II Germany.
I think that's probably right too. But here's a separate question or a related question: is there any prognosis, or is there any scenario that the Ukraine side could suddenly stiffen up and stop the Russian side and turn it into a stalemate even?
Oh, I think it's not possible anymore. So this is why I was very critical of the 2023 counteroffensive. Is like they shouldn't have went for the Zaporizhia line, the Zaporizhia front offensive, because that is the most heavily defended line in the Russian front lines. They should have reserved and kept all these 12 brigades, offensive brigades in reserve, to hold the line and to drag out the war if they necessarily needed to. But somehow there is seemingly some kind of a political pressure on Ukraine to show something. And as a result, they went for the most heavily defended line. Maybe they are very confident about their capabilities to destroy the Russians. And they wanted to show the Russians that we can destroy your strongest line. And maybe by extension, the Russians may give up. Because like if the Russians' most heavily defended line cannot defend against a Ukraine NATO style attack, then maybe the Russians may give up. I think maybe that was the mentality. But somehow that just turned out to be a massive waste of the entire offensive force, which I half jokingly say that they should have just went for Belgorod. And this is what exactly we see in the Kursk offensive. When the Ukrainians have a proper offensive group of forces try to incur into Russia, they can actually give Russia some problems. And if you have 12 full brigades going for Belgorod, I'm 100% sure they will conquer Belgorod, and they will have a much more pricey, precious conquest to trade with the Russians in a potential peace negotiation. Maybe they can trade. They can trade one city for another city or something. But
yeah, that Wyatt, that's a fascinating theory actually right now, and I actually think that there's a lot of validity to it. Had the Ukraine side plan to go into the 2023 offensive and all these Surovikin lines that were built, and Russia was prepared for that, but if instead they had used that striking power to go into Russia where they have now, or even into Belgorod, as you suggest, where there wasn't defensive lines, they almost certainly could have used all of that armor and firepower and everything else to achieve something there, and might have had some success. But now then that they have done it here after the loss of everything they suffered in 2023, I don't think they have the striking power. So now you tell me if you think I'm wrong here, but by this incursion that they have made in the Kursk area, which on this face value is not insignificant, but they don't have enough forces to take it even up to those objectives you showed me on the map there that they had, much less to the actual city of Kursk.
Kursk is too far. That's why, if they traveled like 30 kilometers deep into Russia right now, have they attacked Belgorod, they would have been fighting inside Belgorod right now. And it would be a huge difference. Taking the war to the Russians and fight within one of their major cities, a capital city of oblast no less, that would have so much more PR value. You encourage the Western confidence more. You will demoralize the Russians' will more, perhaps. But they did not do that. And there's also some important thing to note. At the early part of 2023, there is no fat bombs. There's no glide bombs. The Lancets are not that common. So and then the Russians do not have the Krasnopol. They still have some ammo issues. They haven't get all the ammunition from the North Koreans or something. So the technological situation for the Russians right then was different from right now. And
very much so.
If they do it now, it will still fail, unfortunately. But just that if they had done it then, 1 year ago, they would have taken Belgorod, and they would have made Belgorod a Bakhmut, and really make the Russians pay, even if they can't win the war. Although I personally don't think Ukraine can win this war, but at least they make the Russians pay, and this would at least be something. Now the Kursk offensive is very weird because they are doing this maneuver warfare. They go into the countryside, they capture some village here and there. They have one major town, Sudzha, and they're going for Karanevo. But capturing all these places is useless. You're not doing much. You're not punishing the Russians. They are treating the civilians well. So yes, because they want to maintain the PR image. But then what are you punishing the Russians? Nothing. You're not doing anything at all. You are just driving around and get hit by drones. And then you hit the Russian lines, you battle with the Russian lines, and you cannot break it through, then nothing is achieved. If if it's up to me, I will at least burn down every single village I went through. No, at least it's something. At least you're pillaging. You see,
I mean, it's not terrible, but I mean, in war, that is something. But yeah, that's that.
At least you're punishing, right, the Russians for their offensive, into Ukraine. Now they're not doing anything; they're just driving around and get hit, and you're just attritioning away your troops for nothing.
And here's an interesting comment. So that seems to be the thought. Here is a CNN video from I think earlier today where they were talking about some of the potential objectives, and watch how the CNN expert here talks about it. Here in just a second. Sorry, we're getting that video queued up. Okay, maybe we don't have that right now.
Wait.
Okay, I guess we'll go to that. But anyway, the bottom line is that it showed, or it talked about how they were going to, wait a minute, here, there it is.
All right.
Side, there's also the sense of destabilization, right, of trying to cut through the propaganda and get the message across to the Russian people that they are in fact at war, and that propaganda machine is really in full swing at the moment now, more than 2 weeks into the Ukrainian incursion in Kursk, because the Russian media, and taking their cue from the Russian authorities, really attempt to prove to the people that this is an isolated incident and a terror attack. And look, this is what you're seeing from the Ukrainian military. They are also doing their own messaging, really trying to show that they have the initiative in the Kursk region and are hitting very hard back at Russia's resistance, which really 2 weeks in is only really starting to take shape, John.
And yeah, and so you see that now that particular one, at least those images that are going out, does make it look to the Russian people that there is a cost, because those are Russian cities, not Ukraine cities that are, going into flames there. And the U.S. Striker vehicles with its autocannon are causing lots of damage here. But you have to keep going back to the question, towards what end? What is it trying to be accomplished here? Because now the CNN person there was saying to show the Russian people that the war is being brought onto their territory, to show them it's real. But here's the thing, and I wonder your view on this as well, is because that is a double-edged sword. I think the idea is that it'll make Russians think, oh, this is a war, we should end it, we should bring it to a conclusion. Or it's going to make the Russian people mad and tell them, no, we need to go further. And that, I think, is the big risk.
It's going to be a Pearl Harbor situation. So that's the problem. Like, the Japanese thought that, to do a strategic defeat at Pearl Harbor, the Americans were like, oh, we'll give up. But Russia and United States is the same kind of country. They both have the capacity to be a superpower. Although Russia is not yet a superpower right now, they're nuclear power, they're major power. But the people have the same mentality as the Americans. No, they don't take defeats well, and that is the problem. So even when I talk about Ukrainians going and take Belgorod, they have to fight at Belgorod, and the Russians will fight back. But at least the battle is there. Is in the Russian land. That is the whole idea. But the problem now with the Kursk offensive, there is this weird situation where they are putting out propagandas of like, they give this old woman food, and then the woman is very happy. They hug the Ukrainian soldiers. But why? Why are you doing that? The Russians do that in Ukraine makes sense, because one day they want to annex major parts of Ukraine. They want to show that we are the protector of the Russian people. We want to know we are here. We are providing you food and shelter and whatnot. We will protect you. There is a PR message to that, to doing that to the civilians. But the Ukrainians going into Kursk region, treating the civilians well, it's a bit weird. It's like, are you going to stay here? Are you going to treat the Russian people well forever? Are you going to like conquer this ground forever? Or no, what is the objective? And that is very difficult. That I'm not sure, I'm not sure this whole thing is being sold together properly. It feels a bit disjointed.
Yeah. Well, and you can certainly say that's a consistent theme, because we've seen that. I was just frustrated, and it felt really bad for the Ukraine side, especially all during 2023 when they launched that offensive, and as you pointed out here, in kind of the worst way that they could have. But that's what they're doing. I mean, they're in charge of it. So I guess that's what they chose to do, and we'll have to wait and see if it plays out. I think that
it's very similar to the Kursk offensive, actually. So, like, on the first day of war, usually the first day is the most powerful day. where your fist is fully intact. You punch through and you're going to punch hard. But when your initial first day offensive, you're not going too far, then the offensive clearly has failed. And that's the feeling I get for the Kursk offensive. It's like it's not hard enough. They didn't go far enough. Zaporizhia offensive, the Ukrainians counter offensive, by the second day, I'm already calling it failure. Because the after the first day, the kind of capture that they have gone through is not good enough, because you have a full 100% fully intact force, and this force should have the biggest punch. But Kursk offensive have the same problem as well. They did not punch hard enough. They didn't go through hard enough. Of course, the pro-Ukrainians may be saying that, oh, but it's a lot of grounds, but the objectives are so far away. You need to go even further, and that's the problem right now. I think for the Ukrainians, there is no good options. I always know people ask, what's the purpose of the Kursk offensive? I just tell people there's no good options. What else do you expect them to do? There's no place to go. The Belgorod is already not doable because the Russians developed that buffer zone for this purpose, to protect Belgorod, because Belgorod is the weak point. So now the Ukrainians cannot just punch through into Belgorod. Now they try to punch Kursk. But no, again, too little, too late, because no, Belgorod should be the easier target. So, but again, what can the Ukrainians do? No.
Well, there is an answer to that. They can seek a negotiated settlement by recognizing that they don't have the capacity to wage and win a war, which is what I've been arguing almost from the outset of that, to great futility. But anyway, we'll have to wait and see how it continues to play out. Listen, Wyatt, I cannot tell you how grateful I am to have had you on today. This has been one of the best shows that we've ever put on looking at the tactical situation. Really appreciate this, and I look forward to having you back on our show again soon.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm very happy to be here and share what I know.
You be perfect. Yeah, it's been fabulous. I can't wait to have you back on, and appreciate you guys too. And by all means, go and visit Wyatt on his channel, Defense Politics Asia. He's got this kind of great stuff all the time. We go and we visit there too, and encourage you to do the same. So we appreciate him coming on. Appreciate you guys coming on. And by the way, we're going to look at the other side of this afternoon with the ever popular Larry Johnson, former CIA analyst. Where is Putin's counterattack? Where is the big counterattack? What are Putin's options? Where might he go next? You will not want to miss that. 2 p.m. Eastern time in the United States. And we will see you on the next episode of Daniel Davis Deep Dive.